They didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves like real authority does. They came at 3 in the morning with boots on gravel, flashlights slashing through my windows, and voices barking commands they had no legal right to give. 4 figures stood at the edge of my property line, like a bad decision dressed up as enforcement. They shouted about HOA orders and community compliance like those words meant something out here. They didn't. Not on my land. Not at my door. Not at that hour. I stayed still, listening, measuring, already knowing this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an intimidation attempt wearing a costume. This was home invasion energy pretending to be paperwork. And they had already crossed the line. Rex was awake before I was fully standing. His body went rigid, low growl vibrating through the floorboards. Not panicked, not loud, just controlled warning. That sound doesn't come from fear. It comes from certainty. I could hear the HOA goons outside shifting their weight, radios crackling. One of them laughing like this was supposed to scare me. It didn't. Fear only works when it's unexpected. This had been coming for weeks. Before we move forward, drop a comment from where are you watching right now? Because what happened next didn't just end their power trip. It exposed exactly how fragile fake authority really is. They yelled that I was under arrest. No badge, no warrant, no jurisdiction. Just loud mouths and borrowed confidence. One of them kicked at the gate like he was testing how far he could push before someone pushed back. That's when the porch light came on. Not dramatic, not rushed. Just enough light to let them know I was awake and very aware. Rex stepped into view beside me, all muscle and discipline, eyes locked on the closest threat. The shotgun stayed low, visible but idle, exactly where it needed to be. Not raised, not aimed, present. The balance shifted immediately, and they felt it even if they didn't want to admit it. Karen wasn't there yet, but her fingerprints were all over this. You could smell it in the way they spoke, the phrases they used, the confidence they borrowed from someone who thought money and paperwork could replace law. This wasn't enforcement. It was harassment escalation, clipboard parasites playing cop on private land. One of them tried to read from a laminated sheet, like that would suddenly make trespassing legal. Another demanded I step forward. None of them crossed the threshold, not after Rex took a half-step closer and showed teeth without making a sound. That silence scared them more than barking ever could. But that's not even the half of it. Engines started in the distance. Tires on gravel, more than one vehicle, moving fast. The HOA thugs straightened up, smugness creeping back into their posture like backup had arrived. One of them smirked and said, "You should have complied earlier." They thought the cavalry was coming for them. They thought this show of force was about to end with me on my knees and my property signed away under pressure. They didn't know I'd already made the call. They didn't know I'd documented everything. They didn't know real authority doesn't shout in the dark. Here's where everything blew apart. This didn't start at 3 in the morning. It started weeks earlier, in broad daylight, with entitlement dressed up as authority and a woman who believed confidence could replace jurisdiction. I own acreage, not a cul-de-sac. Deeded land with boundaries set long before anyone invented an HOA cult to micromanage other people's lives. Out here, routines matter. Fences get checked, equipment gets maintained. You stay prepared because help doesn't arrive fast and mistakes compound. Rex wasn't a pet. He was trained, conditioned, and disciplined for one purpose: protect the perimeter and read threats before they turn physical. The shotgun wasn't a prop either. It was legal, locked, and understood. Tools don't create danger. People abusing authority do. Karen arrived in a spotless SUV that didn't belong on dirt. She stepped out in pressed clothes and practiced concern, eyes scanning my property like she was inventorying assets. She introduced herself with a title that sounded official enough to intimidate someone who didn't know better, something about a ranch community association that had never existed in this county. She spoke fast and vague, leaning on jargon and implication, the language of a clipboard parasite who relies on pressure instead of proof. She talked about safety initiatives, compliance reviews, and community standards as if repeating the words made them real. It didn't. When I asked for credentials, she smiled like I'd missed the point. Her power positioning was subtle at first. Comments about neighbors, suggestions about inspections, warnings framed as advice. She pointed at Rex like he was a liability instead of a working K9, and glanced at the barn like it was already under her control. When I asked again for documentation, she deflected, pivoted, and implied consequences without naming them. That's how fake authority operates. Never specific enough to challenge, never solid enough to verify. Rex stayed still, watching her hands, watching her eyes, registering the mismatch between her words and her intent. I told her calmly that any legitimate authority would be welcomed once it arrived with paperwork. Her smile tightened. That's when the tone shifted. She mentioned committees. She mentioned reports. She mentioned that properties resisting community alignment often found themselves facing complications. Not threats, she insisted, just patterns. I recognized the maneuver instantly. This wasn't governance. It was a shakedown dressed as oversight. When she realized I wasn't backing down, she stepped away and made a call within earshot, lowering her voice just enough to sound deliberate. She said something about handling non-compliant properties and needing a crew. She didn't look back when she left. She didn't have to. The message was already delivered. After that, the circling began. Slow drive-bys, questions to neighbors. A clipboard parasite doesn't move alone. They test the perimeter first. Rex noticed before I did. His patrols tightened, his focus sharpened. I checked records, called the county, verified every claim she'd made. There was nothing. No filings, no jurisdiction, no authority. Just a power-drunk board fantasy fueled by intimidation and money. That's when I understood the real play. She wasn't trying to regulate me. She was trying to break me. And that's when I stopped waiting for it to escalate and started preparing for when it inevitably would. Once you see how an HOA mafia operates, you can't unsee it. Karen didn't act alone. She never had to. People like her build distance between themselves and the damage so they can claim clean hands when things turn ugly. The pressure came in layers. First the visit, then the warnings, then the quiet interference that's meant to make you doubt your footing. This wasn't governance. This was abuse of authority masquerading as community concern, and it escalated exactly the way predators always do when they think their target is isolated. The first fence cut looked accidental if you didn't know what to look for. Clean slice, strategic section, just enough to cause trouble without drawing attention. Then a water trough smelled wrong, chemical and sharp, not something livestock should ever drink. That's not vandalism. That's targeted harassment designed to hurt without being seen. Trespassing violation disguised as coincidence. Rex tracked it immediately, nose low, tail rigid, following scent lines that didn't belong on my land. He stopped at the tree line and stared into nothing, which told me everything I needed to know. Someone had been watching. Neighbors started talking quietly. One mentioned Karen asking questions she had no right to ask. Another mentioned warnings about compliance and community harmony. Same phrases, same tone, same implied threat. That's when the pattern snapped into focus. This wasn't about me specifically. I was just the one who didn't flinch. Karen's HOA cult worked by identifying who would fold fast and who needed pressure. Clipboard parasites, don't swing first. They surround. They isolate. They apply stress until resistance feels expensive. But they always overreach eventually. Always. I called the sheriff before the next move. Not to complain, but to document. Jurisdiction matters when fake authority starts impersonating the real thing. The answer was immediate and clear. No HOA, no task force, no committee, no right to step foot on my property. What I was dealing with wasn't civil. It was criminal. Organized harassment with a paper trail just thin enough to scare people who didn't know better. That confirmation locked my resolve. This wasn't going to end with conversation. It was going to end with exposure. Karen pushed harder after that, like she sensed the window closing. Another visit, another set of veiled threats, another mention of enforcement coming whether I liked it or not. Her language shifted from suggestion to certainty, from implication to command. That's the moment every power-drunk board member reveals themselves. They stop pretending it's optional. They start acting like they own you. And that's when the abuse becomes undeniable. The last thing she said before leaving that day wasn't loud, but it was clear. She told me I'd forced her hand. That's when I knew the next knock wouldn't be polite. I stopped reacting and started recording. That's the pivot fake authority never anticipates. Cameras went up where they couldn't be seen from the road. Trail cams watched the fence lines. Timestamps mattered. Angles mattered. Rex adjusted with me, his patrols tightening around the southern edge where the ground still held chuz prints that didn't belong. The next trespassing violation wasn't subtle at all. A truck idled too long past midnight, headlights off, engine whispering like secrecy made it legal. The lens caught faces. The audio caught voices. The intimidation attempt graduated from nuisance to evidence. Karen came back faster than she should have. That was the tell. She arrived the morning after another cut fence, talking about solutions, with a folder tucked under her arm like she was doing me a favor. She stood where the cameras could see her and spoke like the damage was inevitable unless I complied. Protection racket energy wrapped in bureaucratic language. She referenced inspections that didn't exist, rules that weren't filed, consequences she couldn't enforce. When I asked for written authority again, she deflected again. Rex didn't. He shifted, eyes locked, breathing slow, reading her scent like a confession. She noticed. Her voice tightened. Neighbors started sending messages instead of whispers, screenshots, times, names, a pattern across properties that looked identical to mine. Same phrases, same escalation, same fake enforcement threats. That's when the proof stopped being personal and became structural. This wasn't a Karen problem. This was an HOA mafia problem. A surveillance creep network that relied on silence to survive. I packaged everything cleanly. Dates, clips, statements. The sheriff didn't need convincing. He needed a moment. Karen tried to seize momentum with a declaration. She announced an inspection window and mentioned manpower like it was already arranged. She said refusal would trigger enforcement. She said it calmly, like inevitability had already signed the paperwork. That's when the trap closed. Not with anger, with patience. I told her any entry without lawful authority would be treated as trespassing. I said it once. I said it clearly. She smiled like she'd won. That smile didn't last. That evening, Rex tracked movement along the tree line again. Different scent, more bodies, purposeful. The cameras caught vehicles staging beyond the property boundary. Radios chirped, boots scuffed gravel. This wasn't bluff anymore. This was the prelude to a home invasion dressed as compliance. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. Everything was already in place. When Karen decided to force the issue, she guaranteed witnesses, timestamps, and consequences. The next move would be public, and that's exactly what she never planned for. They came before sunset. Not because they were confident, but because they wanted witnesses on their terms. 3 trucks rolled in behind Karen's SUV like a parade of bad judgment, engines loud, posture aggressive, doors slamming with performative authority. 4 men stepped out wearing mismatched gear and identical entitlement, radios clipped, hands resting where weapons should have been but weren't. Fake enforcement loves costumes. Karen took center position immediately, voice raised just enough to carry, announcing an inspection like saying it louder made it legal. She didn't ask permission. She declared ownership of the moment. That was her mistake. Rex moved first, not forward, but sideways, cutting off the most direct path to my porch. His presence changed the math instantly. The closest thug slowed, recalculated, then pretended he meant to stop there anyway. The shotgun came into view, still down, still controlled, still silent. I didn't aim it. I didn't need to. The message was already delivered. Karen kept talking, rattling off fabricated standards and imaginary emergency powers, stacking words like bricks and hoping the wall would hold. It didn't. She demanded access. She demanded compliance. She demanded I step aside so her crew could conduct their inspection. Trespassing violation spoken out loud, in front of cameras, neighbors, and witnesses who had begun drifting closer once the noise carried. When I refused, she escalated exactly the way a power-drunk board always does. She accused me of threatening the community. She accused me of obstruction. She accused me of forcing her hand. Her thugs shifted, spreading slightly, testing angles, measuring Rex, measuring me, measuring how far they could push before this turned ugly. One of them took a step he shouldn't have. Rex's growl cut through the air like a blade. Not loud, not frantic, final. The man froze, hands lifting instinctively, fear finally breaking through bravado. That's when Karen snapped. She pulled her phone and made a call she wanted everyone to hear, talking about authorizations and escalation like she was summoning something unstoppable. She smiled again. That same smile. She thought she still had control. She didn't see the headlights yet. The sound reached Rex before it reached them. His posture changed, weight shifting back into calm confidence. Engines approached fast, disciplined, nothing like the sloppy convoy she'd assembled. The thugs straightened, relief creeping into their faces as their assumed backup had arrived. Karen's voice rose, triumphant, already narrating her victory. Then the lights hit the driveway. Red and blue. 3 cruisers. The sheriff struck behind them. Real authority doesn't announce itself with threats. It arrives and lets the silence do the work. Everything collapsed at once. The thugs stepped back instinctively, hands visible, eyes darting. Karen's smile died mid-breath. The sheriff stepped out slow, hand near his sidearm, eyes scanning, reading the scene in seconds. He didn't ask who was in charge. He already knew. Karen launched into her speech, polished, practiced, explaining inspections and non-compliance like this was all a misunderstanding. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked for her documentation. She had none. Not a badge, not a warrant, not a filing, not a single piece of lawful authority. The sheriff turned to me, and I handed him everything. Footage, logs, statements, dates, patterns. The crowd grew quiet as the story assembled itself in real time. What Karen had built on intimidation couldn't survive scrutiny. The thugs realized it before she did. Their confidence drained as the word impersonation entered the conversation. Conspiracy followed. Trespassing violation. Organized harassment. Each charge landed heavier than the last. Karen tried to argue, tried to reassert, tried to command. The sheriff didn't raise his voice. He raised his hand. Deputies moved. Cuffs came out. The moment authority shifted from pretend to real was absolute. Neighbors watched, cameras rolled. Karen's HOA mafia dissolved in public, stripped of illusion, reduced to a woman explaining herself to officers who didn't care about her tone. When the cuffs closed, no one cheered. They didn't need to. The humiliation was complete. HOA went dead silent. The noise disappeared after the cruisers pulled out, but the consequences were just getting started. Karen's confidence didn't survive the ride to the station. By morning, the story was already moving faster than she ever had. Impersonation of authority isn't a misunderstanding. Organized harassment isn't a paperwork error. The sheriff didn't frame it emotionally. He framed it accurately. What Karen ran wasn't an HOA. It was a pressure operation built on intimidation, trespassing violations, and fake enforcement. Once the label changed, everything else followed. Statements were taken methodically. Neighbors who'd been quiet for months suddenly had timelines, texts, photos, similar encounters, same phrases, same threats. Same promises of escalation if compliance didn't happen fast enough. The pattern snapped into focus for everyone at once. Karen hadn't invented a system. She'd copied one. Clipboard parasites always do. They rely on confusion and isolation, counting on people being too tired or unsure to push back. That strategy collapses the moment law enforcement sees repetition. The thugs folded first. Fake enforcers always do when the stakes turn real. Their stories overlapped just enough to confirm coordination. Paid visits, instructions to intimidate, orders to provoke without crossing lines that would bring patrol cars too quickly. Karen's name surfaced in every account. Not as a suggestion, as a commander. Power-drunk boards don't get their hands dirty, but fingerprints still transfer, especially when money changes hands. Rex became a footnote in the reports, but everyone who was there knew better. His presence had prevented the confrontation from turning physical. Controlled deterrence isn't dramatic, but it's effective. The shotgun was noted, verified, logged, and dismissed as lawful. No threats, no misuse, just preparedness. That distinction mattered. It always does when real authority evaluates a situation instead of reacting to noise. Charges stacked cleanly. Impersonation, conspiracy, criminal trespass, coordinated harassment. Karen's legal vocabulary evaporated under statutes she'd never bothered to read. Her HOA cult vanished overnight. Websites went dark. Phone numbers disconnected. People who'd relied on her confidence suddenly couldn't remember her name. That's how power collapses when it's built on intimidation instead of legitimacy. It doesn't fight. It disappears. The sheriff walked the property with me once the paperwork was finished. He didn't give advice. He confirmed boundaries, jurisdiction rights, everything Karen had tried to blur. He told me the case wouldn't be quiet. Too many witnesses. Too much documentation. Too many similar incidents tied together. The retaliation phase wasn't loud. It was procedural. And that's what made it permanent. When night fell again, it was different. Rex patrolled without tension. No engines idled. No lights crept along the fence line. The silence wasn't waiting this time. It was settled. Karen's operation hadn't been scared off. It had been dismantled. The only thing left was the final outcome, and that was already out of her hands.